Hello there, and welcome to episode 3 of Live from Vaders Castle. You're joined by both your hosts, Dan McCrory and John Lee. Hi, John.
Hello there.
How are you doing today?
Yeah, not too bad. How are you?
I'm good. Excited to talk about some clones.
Oh, yes. It's going to be a deep dive into clones, the process, the backstory. The whole lot is going to be included in today's episode.
Exactly. So this episode is going to be an episode for people who know nothing about clones and for people who love clones. So we got you all covered here. We're now 2 weeks out of Bad Batch. I saw on day that we're recording this yesterday, they posted a little teaser saying we're 2 weeks out. So the hype is real.
Yeah, as the days get closer and closer, I'm just getting more and more excited about what we're going to see in this new season from Star Wars.
Yeah, I know. It's very exciting. I think it really does look like it's going to be like Clone Wars Season 8. Not meaning that in a bad way at all, like in the best possible way. It's like continuing that story that we've loved for so long. Anyway, so what we're going to do, we're going to get things started by just sort of giving a little bit of the lore and background to the clones for those who aren't aware of it. There's quite a lot of detail to do with the clones, their history, their backstory, who they are, how they fit into the Star Wars universe. So we're going to sort of go through all of that, and then we're going to discuss some specific episode of Clone Wars that are sort of worth watching if you want to learn a lot about the clones. And then we'll finish off discussing some of our favourite clones, so that by the time you finish listening to this podcast, you're even more ready for the Bad Batch in 2 weeks. Even if you don't have time to binge all of Clone Wars, you've at least got that core knowledge you need for the Bad Batch.
Yeah, don't worry about watching the Clone Wars. Just listen to our podcast and you'll be fine.
Exactly. But then also watch the Clone Wars, because it's great.
Yeah, of course.
Right, so we'll kick things off with sort of the backstory of why the clone army was created. It's quite a wobbly history. The sort of origins came quite a long time before the Republic first discovered about their existence. So in Attack of the Clones, whilst investigating Jango Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi comes across Kamino, and in turn the clone army that has been made for the Republic without the Republic or the Jedi knowing any of this. And when speaking to the Kaminoans, he's told that it was Jedi Master Sifo Dyas who had put in the order for the clone army. So this was obviously done in secret. Now, the backstory that we've got for Sifo Dyas, he was a young Jedi at the time that Count Dooku was a Jedi himself. They were both friends as Padawans and younglings, but Sifo Dyas was gifted with foresight. He was able to see visions of the future, but it was sort of soon realized that was more of a curse for him, and many times he'd see battles or awful things to happen, and it sort of started to drive him quite mad. And you sort of learn a lot about his character in the Dooku Jedi Lost, which I've just read. Really interesting. But him and Dooku were best friends, but he was always haunted by these visions. So it turns out that Sifo Dyas had a vision, well, many visions of a massive war that was going to be the downfall of the Jedi and all this. So he, sort of in his sort of, I don't want to say madness, but it was somewhat madness, decided to order this clone army. And Sidious caught wind of this happening and then used his new apprentice, Count Dooku, or Darth Tyrannus, to sort of secretly seize control of this clone army creation, so they could use it for their own wicked ways, which is what Order 66 became. So yeah, the clone army had been developing for 10 years by the time that Obi-Wan found it, but it was all done in secret by a Jedi himself. But I think there's some hints in sort of Clone Wars episodes and stuff that perhaps Sifo Dyas sort of wasn't being manipulated by Dooku. There's an episode where they sort of find Cypher Diaz's crash ship, and Dooku comes to sort of make sure that the last little bit of information about him is sort of wiped away. And in that, Dooku says that, Cypher Diaz was essentially working with him. How true that was, we don't really know. Sort of like there are gaps where we don't really know what was happening, but that's the most sort of information we've got. But it led to a army of millions and millions of clones being ready for them to fight in the Clone Wars, which took place just after the end of Attack of the Clones.
That is a brief introduction, I suppose, into the clones. I mean, and as we've been saying, if you want a real deep dive into these things, that episode of the Clone Wars is great to watch, and the book Dan was talking about, great read. That'll give you a really good insight into the origin of the clones. So, as we know from Attack of the Clones, the clones were commissioned on Kamino by the Kaminoans. And this is a race of beings who are very intelligent, and they are pretty much the only ones across the Star Wars galaxy who have perfected cloning.
And they have very long necks as well.
They do have very long necks. So this is why Cypher Diaz went to them in order to build the clone army. And they are clones of a particular man. And this man is Jango Fett, who you will recognize from all eras of Star Wars. Obviously, he's in the Clone Wars, but you'll recognize him in Attack of the Clones, and you'll recognize him in the later works of Boba Fett as well, as these are all clones. So they look identical to each other. Yeah,
exactly. Boba Fett is not his direct son. It's just a clone that he's claimed as his son.
Mm-hmm.
And interesting enough, I'll just chime in here. In a comic, a Jango Fett comic, it was Dooku who approached Jango Fett to be the first. There's a word for it. The clone, the thing that they were going to clone. He was approached by
the donor.
Yeah, the donor. Yeah, he was approached, and he sort of said he'll do it on one condition, and it never sort of explicitly said what that one condition was. But it's implied that one condition would be that he'd get a son that was a perfect copy of him that he could use to continue his legacy and train him to be the most feared bounty hunter in the galaxy as he was, but continue that legacy on. So Jango Fett did sort of get involved for selfish reasons, and also the fact that they paid him an extortionate amount of money.
Yes. Yeah. As you just listened to what Dan said there, he said that obviously it took 10 years between Cypher Diaz going and purchasing the Clone Order to then them being ready and willing to fight in the Attack of the Clones. And obviously the Jedi weren't going into war with children. So basically the Kaminoans had, although they used Jango Fett as the base for their clone, they made a few altered changes in order to make them, one, better soldiers. So they basically made them more docile and recipient to orders, because while Jango Fett was a perfect specimen for an army, he was a bit more volatile than I think the Kaminoans wanted and the Jedi would have wanted in their army. So they made those changes, and then they also included rapid aging. So they age at double the speed of a normal person. So while it only took 10 years, there's only 10 years between them being started and being finished by Attack of the Clones. They're actually like physically about 20. And then obviously throughout the Star Wars stories, this continues. So in Rebels, you have characters such as Rex and stuff who really should be in their prime, about 25, 30. They have the physical appearance of like much older men of like 50, 60.
Yeah. Which obviously they needed that rapid aging because, if you're growing an army from scratch, you need them to be ready in time. So it's their way of sort of having these batches of the phase 1 batch and the phase 2 batches of clones ready in time for this war, which they didn't know when was going to happen. So they timed it pretty well.
Yes. As you see in in Attack of the Clones. So you have the first batch who are ready to go and fight by the end of the film. But then as Obi-Wan's walking through the cloning facility, he, there's other younglings there who have just been developed, if you will, and they're still going through their training. And then obviously as the Clone Wars continues, there's obviously new clones constantly being produced, and they're always going through training. So yeah, while they didn't know when they were going to need it, I think they did time it pretty well, and they already had the spares ready for the next fight.
Spares. All clones getting treated as disposables, which is obviously a very big theme of the Clone Wars TV show, is how, these people who have been cloned and used as soldiers only are, themselves people.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, we have Jango Fett, we just discussed, who was the donor and the DNA base for all their clones. But as well as the person, the clone army's equipment and suits and things are all very loosely based off Jango Fett's Mandalorian armor. Obviously, the Mandalorians are one of the most feared warrior races in the galaxy. You have characters such as Jango Fett, Boba Fett, and more recently we have Din Djarin in The Mandalorian. This goes to give you a bit of a background on how fearsome and impressive they are as a race. So when they're designing the clone trooper armor, they chose a very similar pattern and design for the armor. The helmet is the same. It's got the same triangle shaped visor, and just the outlook is basically very similar in order to, I suppose, instill that same image of fearsome warriors across the galaxy in their army. Yeah,
it does sort of have that, that fierce warrior look that they're going for with the clones. They sort of all sort of have that look, and then obviously that leads on to sort of be inspiration for the Stormtrooper armor. Sort of the helmets become a bit more round, but that original design, which has gone from Jango Fett to clone to Stormtrooper, sort of runs through the whole, sort of is a thread that connects all those pieces of armor, which is quite cool.
Yes. So originally when you first see the clones in Attack of the Clones, they're wearing a Phase 1 set of armor, which is just obviously the first lot that they're given. And they provide, basic protection and things that reduces exposure from space, gases, melee damage, some protection against blaster bolts, but not a lot. If you watch the show, there's a lot of clones that get shot.
Yeah, you've seen some clones can tank a couple shots if it hits in the right place of the armor, but not a lot of them survive.
No, if you get glancing blows off the shoulder or the hip or something, you might be able to tank a few shots, but one straight down the middle of your armor and it's not doing much to protect you there.
Yeah, exactly. But then the armor sort of over time was very much designed, colored, adjusted for different roles sort of within the clone army. And we'll sort of go into more detail about some of the different types of clones in a bit. But the armor, was quite often personalized by each clone, or even their own physical appearance. They'd shave their head in a certain way, or they'd put tattoos in a certain place, to sort of make themselves stand out.
And then obviously you'd have different regiments in the Clone Wars depending on what Jedi they were serving under.
Yeah, it was normally just based on the it was a battalion was served under one Jedi general.
Yeah, so Anakin's battalion, the 501st, had a different armor colorings and things to the 212th, which was Obi-Wan's. Anakin's had a blue coloring to some of the markings, while Obi-Wan's was orange. This is basically just help the clones have a bit more of an identity, I suppose. I suppose in the battalion they're all wearing the same stuff, but then even the individual clones designed painted their armor slightly different.
Yeah, they all tried to have their own identity, which is obviously, natural of them to want that. And I think that was something that certainly you don't get as much from the films until you get into the Clone Wars TV show and you realize how personal the story of each clone is, and well, heartbreaking at times.
Yeah, so I think, especially in the Clone Wars, I think what they did with the armor and moving from phase 1 to phase 2 was really try and get that point across about how different they are from the droid army of the Separatists, because obviously all the droids pretty much look exactly the same, apart from like you might have ones that are camo if they're going to go fighting for Lucia or something. But yeah, the droids all look the same, while in the clones they had their own style, their own individual look.
Yeah,
which I think was a big point in the Clone Wars.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, the droid army, you had your B1s who practically all look the same. Your B2s that all obviously look chunkier than the B1s, but they all looked the same. And then your droidicas and your commando droids and that, even though, as John said, sometimes they had a little bit of paintwork if they were going in different sort of environments. They practically were, just a mass of metal, as opposed to the clones who really tried to take their own identities on.
Yeah, I think we'll probably talk about that a bit more when we talk about the Clone Wars, because as I said, that really, I think, fleshes out the individual nature of the clones. And I think that the show really brings that to the forefront. So we'll go into more detail there when we talk about the show, because the examples we give will spoil our top 5 lists, I think, if I was to talk about it too much now.
Yeah, but I think that's the reason why it is such a worthwhile watch, and why Bad Batch is exciting, because it shows a completely different side to the clone army than you got from the films. They really just were just a faceless army in the films. And when you see the shows, you actually get to see these individual clones, these people, and all their own stories develop.
Yeah. So, as Dan was alluding to earlier, there's the clone army. I suppose like any army has different ranks and different clones who do certain tasks. So obviously I think one of the most famous or most recognizable ones is the ARC troopers, and this is the Advanced Recon Commandos, and these are characters such as, if you watch Clone Wars, like Rex, or eventually Fives,
Echo as well. Yeah,
Echo. These are basically specialist troopers, and these are like the top tier ones. I suppose the easiest way to reflect it to the modern, the real world, is probably like the SAS. So these are the boys you send in when you want a specific task done a specific way.
Yeah, and they were introduced originally in the Cartoon Network Clone Wars, like the OG Clone Wars show. I think there was an episode called ARC Troopers, and they were shown to be using like sort of dual pistols as opposed to the sort of like the standard blasters. They were like leaders, so they'd like lead a small group, very tactical, specialized. So yeah, the ARC Troopers are sort of the special service. There you go, the Marines, the top class of the army,
the top boys.
Yeah, and then I mean from then onwards, you just you go into all sorts of different specialized units. You had your ARF troopers, which are Advanced Recon Force troopers, and they're the cavalry. They're the ones that ride the little sort of mini chicken walkers, the AT-RTs, and so they're used for scouting and for battle. You got your BARC troopers, who are sort of specialized ARC troopers, but they're trained to pilot the speeder bikes. You've got obviously your pilots, your jet troopers with jetpacks. You have the shock troopers, which are the Coruscant guards. So they're recognizable by their red armor markings, and they're specifically used to protect the Chancellor and senators back on Coruscant. And then another example, is the ordnance troopers, who I think are shown by having orange armor, or I don't know if the example that I've got a Clone Wars character encyclopedia in front of me here. I don't know if the example I've been given is just happens to be wearing orange, or if they all wear orange. But there's an episode in season 1, I think, with the Blue Shadow virus, and there's these bombs that need defusing, and it's ordnance troopers are specialized in bomb defusing. So as you see, sort of even with the clones being bred for a very general purpose. They're trained for very specific jobs in the same way that a normal army would function. You'd have your rifles, but then you'd have your engineers, you'd have your signalers, etc., etc. So the clones sort of do follow that format as well.
Yeah, and then obviously in a couple of episodes of the Clone Wars, there's extra ones, but like it branches off to extra things. You got like officers, like guards, etc. There's so many. I think in a couple of episodes, it's even alluded to the fact that certain troopers, like these are the areas they want to go into. They're not specifically like, okay, you need to be this, you need to be that. I'm pretty sure they're areas where they can choose what they want to specify in.
Yeah,
I know specifically with the ARC troopers, there's a lot of conversations between some of the clones about they want to make it to ARC trooper status. It's not just something you're given straight away. I know originally it was the first batch, I think, were like the first lot of ARC troopers because they were meant to be like the best. But then as the war went on, there was room for promotions, I suppose. And the clones strove to do that, which I think is, again, another important factor in their individualism.
You're right there, ARC Trooper. You either became an ARC Trooper because you were specially chosen, sort of from your early days of training as an exceptionally good clone. If your reflexes are really good, just, intelligence, strategy, or you gained a promotion for acts of bravery or acts of, great intelligence or strength. So obviously Rex, we're pretty sure, I don't think there's official confirmation, but pretty sure Rex was chosen as an ARC Trooper from training from his very beginning. But then you have Echo and Fives who were promoted to ARC Troopers because of their, success on various missions.
Yeah. I guess that leads us on to, I think, one of the most tragic things about the clones. And this is Order 66.
Exactly.
I'm sure you'll all be familiar with if you've seen Revenge of the Sith. I think it's not particularly obvious about what's going on if you just watch the 3 films. I feel like, again, this is something that needs the Clone Wars to really explain and get a deeper understanding of.
It was definitely something I was confused about before I'd watched the Clone Wars, is why these clones who had, fought alongside the Jedi all this time just, suddenly turned on them because of one order from a guy in a cloak. But what the Clone Wars really gets into is how when Sidious became involved in the cloning process secretly, that puppet master, he made sure each clone had an inhibitor chip placed inside them. And these chips were sold, the Jedi found out about these inhibitor chips, but the Kaminoans told them that they were just there to sort of make them more docile, make them, as John was saying, less like Jango Fett and more like soldiers that follow orders. But inside those inhibitor chips was this programming that when they hear, the command to execute Order 66, that they would turn and murder the nearest Jedi to them. And even the very best and most loyal clones still would do that because it was just in their genetic programming. It wasn't something they could stop themselves from doing unless that chip was removed from their head. Mm-hmm. So it's a pretty dark and sadistic thing to do. But that's Sidious for you.
I think that's really interesting with it as well, is especially when you deep dive into like some of the extended information you have about it. Like there's one that really interesting. I think it's in Star Wars Battlefront 2, like the original one. I think it's like a voice clip from there, which I always found really interesting about Order 66. And it was from a clone called Bly, I think his name is. And he was the one who killed, what was that Jedi's name? The one on Felucia.
Ayla Secura.
Ayla Secura, yes. It's when him and all of his clone battalion, once they got the Order of 66, he's talking about it in this voice note on the game. And basically what he's saying is one, they couldn't look her in the eye when he was glad that they shot her in the back, because they couldn't, even though in their minds she had betrayed the Republic, which is basically what Order 66 did to them. It made them believe that all the Jedi were traitors to the Republic. They still couldn't bear to look her in the eye because of how much she meant to them. And if you watch the film, which I remember watching the film for the first time, I thought it was a bit overkill, is they shoot her in the back and she falls to the ground, and they all keep shooting her, like, just while she's on the floor.
Yeah, she gets done dirty there, doesn't she?
Yeah, at the time I'm thinking, all right, I think you got her. But this voice note again expands on that and basically explains that they wanted her to die as quickly as possible because they didn't want her to suffer because of just how close the bond they had.
I don't know that.
It makes it 10 times more emotional.
I hope that's canon. I hope that is just treated as even that's Battlefront 2, so it's pre-2014. I hope that's treated as canon because I like that fact. Yeah,
I think it shows really well the emotional side of Order 66 for the clones, because I know they flesh it out quite well in the Clone Wars and in Rebels.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is just a big spoiler warning if you haven't watched the last 4 episodes of season 7 of the Clone Wars. But when Rex turns on Ahsoka, you can almost see in his face that he knows what he's doing is wrong, but he can't stop himself.
Yeah, I think that makes it very interesting. I think especially where they do to expand the clones' story with the Jedi in the Clone Wars, which again we'll get into in a minute. But I think once you get that and go back and watch Revenge of the Sith, it makes it 10 times more emotional, and you get a much deeper understanding of just how evil a plan it was from Darth Sidious.
Yeah, it was a completely wicked and evil plan, but it was also a genius plan because, the whole plan was about, making the Jedi change who they are fundamentally, from peacekeepers to warriors, and then having that view across the galaxy used as the way to convince everyone that they're traitors. It's really ingenious when you think about it, but wickedly, wickedly evil.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Order 66, that, and then Anakin's subsequent massacre of all the Separatist leaders that brought the end to the Clone Wars, lasted 3 years. And obviously there were many, many battles across the core worlds, the mid-rim, the outer rim. Obi-Wan, Anakin, Ahsoka fought in many, many battles. So did a lot of the clones who survived for a long time throughout. But then after the Clone Wars, the clones were initially in the wake of Order 66 continued to be the backbone of the Republic Army, but the Republic Army obviously became the Imperial Army when Palpatine reorganized to the Great Galactic Empire. So they sort of went on to serve as like royal guards, etc., etc. But over time, because of the rapid aging, clones were slowly phased out and replaced with naturally born recruits who were enticed by all the Imperial propaganda. So your stormtrooper army, by the time you get to the Galactic Civil War, you've got very few clones left because most of them are probably aged beyond fighting age. But yeah, I think Bad Batch were probably going to learn more of the specifics of what really happened to the clones after Order 66, because we know roughly, as I just said, but we don't know the full details. So I think Bad Batch is going to cover a lot of these details that we don't know yet. But I mean, yeah, that's pretty much a fairly detailed-ish, backstory, lore, history of the clones. I was never that interested in them until I watched the Clone Wars, and then they fast became some of my favorite characters. And they do have such an interesting backstory. So it's probably a good time to sort of move on and start talking about the Clone Wars then.
Yes, I think this is where we're going to get the most interesting discussions, I think, about great clones, great story arcs. I think just about how the writers on the Clone Wars really spent time and effort making sure that the clones were interesting characters and not just plot devices for the war, which I think is very impressive from them.
And I think the Clone Wars was a huge TV show, focused on so many different, characters, factions, ideas, but there were quite a lot of episodes that were really focused on clones, whether it was an individual clone, whether it was a small group of clones, whether it was the very questions of being a clone itself. The show had a lot of specific episodes about that. So what we've done is we've just compiled a little list of the essential Clone Wars episodes for clones. So if you're wanting to learn more about clones, you're wanting to appreciate clones the same way that me and John appreciate clones, these episodes that we've got, if you watch them, you'll instantly be a big clone stan.
Well, yeah, I hope so. I think if you don't enjoy the clones after some of the episodes I've put, then there's no help for you.
So what we'll do is you read out the episodes you've got, because I've done quite a massive list. So if you read out the episodes you've got, and then I will fill in the gaps with a couple of the extra ones that I probably have written down.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so I've done just a quick top 5 of the ones that I think are the most important to the clones' stories and development, which is Carnage of Krell, which is in season 2, episode 10, and that is the end of a, I think, 4 episode clone arc, which is very good, which I'm sure we'll discuss in more detail in a second.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's season 4, not season 2.
I don't know where I got season 2 from. Anyway, Rising Malevolence, if I can pronounce my words, that's season 1, and that is definitely season 1. That is episode 2. And that is a great arc, a great story with clones, and Plo Koon, I think, again, does a really good way of showing the individual nature of the clones and how the Jedi perceive them.
Yeah, I think that's a really great episode, that one. That's on my list. I do think that really humanizes them. And I'll just add in right here, I included season 1, episode 1 as well, which comes just before Rising Malevolence, and it's called Ambush. And it's an episode where Yoda and a group of clones sort of being hunted on a planet and by Ventress and some droids. And you really see in that episode, like, the way that Yoda views the clones and the way that the clones view themselves. And like they need to learn from Yoda that they're more than just sort of, expendable, and each of them have a purpose. So I think that's another really good episode, season 1, episode 1, and then season 1, episode 2 that John just mentioned.
Yeah, there were 2 very good openers actually to the whole theme of the Clone Wars, I think. Then I've got Victory and Death, which is season 7, episode 12, which is the last episode of the Clone Wars, which links in nicely with Revenge of the Sith and Order 66, and really shows how emotional that is for both the Jedi and the clones. I mean, you see that through the perspective of Ahsoka and Rex specifically, as well as a couple other clones, such as Jesse and half of the 501st Battalion.
The episode you were just talking about, Victory and Death. To be honest, I'd include that whole final Siege of Mandalore arc, which is season 7, episode 9, 10, 11, and 12. Just because from episode 9 you get to see like the clones and their like loyalty to Ahsoka. That's sort of really a touching moment where they paint their helmets, all the way through to how she deals with Order 66 and how tragic Order 66 is for these clones who, really look up to this Jedi that they then have to murder. So I think that whole arc really is really worth watching.
Definitely agree. Yeah. Next on my list, I've got Rookies.
Yes.
Which is a unbelievable episode in season 1. get to meet some fan favorite characters. Some. I think definitely we meet Files in the episode, who then is a fan favorite throughout many seasons of the Clone Wars. And there's a couple more that are on my top 5, which we'll come back to later. But fantastic episode.
You get to meet the whole of Domino Squad.
Domino Squad, that was their name. I was trying to think of that earlier.
Echo, Fives, Heavy, Jesse. I think Jesse's there as well, was he?
Yeah.
Is it Echo, Fives, Jesse, Heavy? Obviously, Rex is there. Rex and Cody are both there. And then the one who dies straight away, I think, is it Odd Job or Odd Droid something? He's got a weird little name.
Yeah, Odd Job seems about right.
It's something like that. It's not Hard Case. It's something else. But yeah, that's your first introduction to Domino Squad, who are the absolute goats of the clones.
Yeah,
I think Rookies is a top 5 episode of Clone Wars, just in general. Standalone episode. So good. And then when you pair it up to a later episode in season 3, episode 1, Clone Cadets, which is set before Rookies, which is when you meet, Domino Squad as, cadets in Camino training and them sort of learning to work together. And then going from that to see them in Rookies. It's very sad. Very, very sad. R.I.P. Heavy.
Yeah, good episode, sir. And finally on my list, I've got the episode Arc Troopers, which is when the Separatists invade Camino.
Yeah. And that's season 3, episode 2.
Yeah.
Just follows on just after Clone Cadets, the one I just mentioned.
Very good episode.
Yeah. And that's the one where you meet Clone 99 or 99, who's a really defected clone to the point that they don't use him as a warrior. They just use him as a janitor, basically. But he has a really special relationship with Domino Squad. And he's sort of a big sort of mentor to them in a weird way in Clone Cadets. And then, spoiler alert, dies in Arc Troopers and becomes the inspiration for Clone Force 99, who go on to be the Bad Batch. So yeah, he's a goat at the game.
He is. I mean, he's a defective clone, but the man's got the heart of gold, and I think any clone would be lucky to have the attitude and the determination of Clone 99, which I think Domino Squad really, which is why they form such a close bond, is because of how much 99 inspires them as a group to go on and pass their cadet status and go off and fight for the Republic. Yeah.
Is that all the ones you had written down?
Yeah, that was my top 5 clone episodes.
I'm going to just drop in the rest of the essential episodes, in my opinion. So the only other ones that I had from season 1 was season 1, episode 16, The Hidden Enemy, which was chronologically one of the first episodes of the Clone Wars. And it's set at the Battle of Christophsis, which you see in the Clone Wars TV show. Not TV show, movie. And there's a clone among the ranks who is given sensitive information to the Separatists as a traitor. And Rex and Cody have to figure out who the traitor is. But there's some really interesting sort of conversations between clones and what they represent and all that stuff in that episode. So I think that's worth watching. And then Innocence of Ryloth, which is season 1, episode 20. This is actually one of my favorite episodes of the Clone Wars, where you meet Waxer and Boyle, 2 clones, and they come across a Twi'lek girl who's been missing from her family, and sort of one of them really wants to look after her, and the other one's just like leave her. And there's that whole sort of discussion between them, but you really sort of see the heart and the care that the clones have in that episode. I think it's a really good one. And Waxer and Boyle are really good characters. So I think that one's worth a watch.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great episode, which again, I think shows the difference between the clones and the droids and really fleshes out the fact that they are, caring, living, breathing people, as opposed to cold calculated droids.
Exactly, yeah. The next one I had was just one episode from season 2, which was season 2, episode 10, The Deserter. The Deserter's a great episode where I think General Grievous, something to do with General Grievous, ends up on Salakumi, and Rex sort of once, I think that they're hunting Grievous or something, but he comes across a deserter, and he used to be a clone, but he's deserted and then set up a family, and he's got a little ranch. He's basically a farmer. And just the conversations between him and Rex about, the purpose that they've been bred for, and, the whole life being decided for them, I think is a really interesting episode. And there's also a really sort of good, it almost feels like a zombie movie at the end with the commando droids trying to break into the ranch. So I think it's a really good episode.
Yeah. I think it's a very interesting episode because you could tell that story just in like a normal army film or something, but
yeah, exactly.
You can take that and apply it to Star Wars characters. I think is again very interesting.
I mean, Dave Filoni was very open about, like, when they made the Clone Wars, him and George would sort of sit down, and George would be like, "Oh, that story from that movie or TV show, I really like that. Let's do our own version of it." So, like the Zillo Beast was their own version of Godzilla, and there's a lot of other examples which I can't remember off the top of my head. But I mean, this Deserter episode was very clearly inspired by those sort of, war films where you have that one deserter that they come across and makes soldiers question what they're doing. So I think that was a good one. I mean, I agree with you. The whole, I mean, I just sort of included the whole Umbara arc, the whole sort of darkness on Umbara, which is season 4, episode 7, 8, 9, and 10. That specific episode that you mentioned is great, but I think that whole arc is just clone centric, and you have this Jedi Master Pong Krell who sees them as just cannon fodder that he can just throw into the open and let them die, and then clones having to sort of deal with that and sort of question that authority for the first time, I think is an unbelievable arc. It's one of my favorite arcs, I think.
Yeah, I think the character of Pong Krell is very interesting, and personally, I think it's the writers he's kind of like the embodiment of like the one of the directions the writers could have gone with the clones. They could have wrote all the clones to be, the same way that Pong Krell sees them. This is, like he very specifically calls Rex by his clone number. He doesn't call any of the clones by their names because he doesn't think they need names because they're not people. Yeah. I think the writers definitely wrote him in that way because that's they're acknowledging the fact that I think they're acknowledging the fact that they could have gone in that direction, but they are showing they've shown off basically what they've done in comparison to his interpretation of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree. And I think, in the original Star Wars films, obviously you don't get a huge amount of time because they're 3 films as opposed to TV show. But you don't get a huge amount of time with, just the general rebels and the general stormtroopers. You don't really see the human aspect to either of those sides. Obviously, in the Clone Wars, the other side is a droid army, so there isn't that human aspect to them, but there is a human aspect to the clones. And because they've got this whole TV show to explore the whole war, it'd be daft not to explore the soldiers, and they just do it so well on so many different occasions. I think these episodes that we're sort of talking about here are probably the best examples of it.
Definitely.
Another one, which is an interesting one because this is part of a droid arc, which most people skip. It's season 5, episode 12. It's called Missing in Action. And this is the one we were talking about a couple of weeks ago. This is George Lucas's favorite arc of the Clone Wars, where you've got a group of droids who end up on a planet and they're on a mission or whatever. Can't even remember what really happens, but I do remember this very specific part where they come across Gregor, and this is your first this is your first and only time meeting Gregor before he appears in Rebels as a much older clone. But he's just working in this diner on another planet, and he's sort of similar into the sort of the deserter episode. You know, he's fed up of being a clone, etc., etc. And you sort of see that other aspect of being a clone, but then you also see the heroism as well when he sort of rescues these droids, and what you think is a sacrifice, but he ends up surviving. But yeah, I think it's a worthwhile watch. It's a weird little episode because of the droids and that sort of thing, but it is a nice little showcase of a clone story. And if you're going to go on to Rebels, it means you meet Gregor in advance of that.
Yeah, nice. An interesting story, even with the
droids.
With the droids. I mean, if you're a droid fan or not, but
And then I think the final little arc that I put in here, well, I say little, it's quite a big arc, is Orders, from season 6. It's episode 1, 2, 3, and 4. And this was the story about Tup, one of the clones, turning on his Jedi, just sort of saying good soldiers must follow orders, good soldiers follow orders. And Five's then going to investigate what's happened, and him discovering the inhibitor chips and the whole conspiracy of Order 66 before, sadly, spoilers, Fives is killed to keep that information from getting into the Jedi.
That's such an emotional arc, I think, because you think, and everyone's seen, by the time you're watching Clone Wars, you've probably seen Revenge of the Sith, so you know that no matter what Fives does, or what happens, he's not going to be alive at the end to tell the information, basically. But it still doesn't take away from the struggle that he is trying to get it out and trying to be taken seriously. Because even at one point in the arc, doesn't Palpatine literally just tells him exactly what it is, in like a little 1v1 thing, and like Fives goes nuts because he just can't believe it, and any rubbish that he's spouting, everyone just takes he's lying, or no one believes him. He's gone
crazy, he's a defective clone, and that
how mental it is.
Yeah, I think that's it's one of the most sort of like one of those arcs where I just sat up and I was like, right, okay, they're doing this, and I just didn't really expect them to go to that sort of length on a kids show, but it really is dark and really, really good, and sort of contextualizes that question of like, how did people never find out about Order 66? That some did, but they just didn't survive to tell the story. So yeah, I'd say those are all the essential Clone Wars episodes if you're focusing on the clones. Some great stuff in there. I mean, if you go past that and you go on to Rebels, there's quite a few interesting episodes when some of the clones come back in that TV show. But that's a topic for another discussion. So should we round it off with a top 5 clones?
Yeah, I think that sounds like a good idea.
Right, you go first. Let's hear your top 5.
I think, most of my top 5 I think are going to be pretty universal, just because I think these are the clones that get the most screen time or like the most story development. But here we go. So we're going to, obviously, top clone is Rex. That means,
of course,
the clone with the most screen time, the clone with the most action, storytelling, some terrific, I think some of my top favorite clone arcs, and just I think arcs in general in the Clone Wars, have Rex in there somewhere, either as a main character or like as the clone commander for the Jedi, etc., etc. Fantastic character. And then we've got Fives. It's again another staple of the Clone Wars TV show up until his tragic death in the arc we just talked about. But yeah, we see him all the way from season 1, Domino Squad, all the way up to his sad demise in season 6, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think he's a very interesting character because, one, he was one of the ones he's worked his way up to ARC Trooper. He wasn't always a an ARC Trooper.
A Domino Squad OG.
Yeah, he earned the role of ARC Trooper. And I think on like the arc we talked about just now, like the Darkness on Umbara arc, he was one of the clones who was adamant that Pong Krell was, wrong, and he was standing up for the clones, while Rex was in a difficult position where he had to follow orders because he was in charge.
Yeah.
And he had to try and play both sides, while Fives was like, no, this is wrong, et cetera, et cetera. I think it makes him a very likable character, and I think it really fleshes out the clones and how much they all mean to each other.
Yeah, another member of Fiver First Royalty. ISIS.
Definitely. Number 3, we've got 99, who we discussed earlier. He's in the top 5 for all those reasons. I think to be honest, without 99, Domino Squad would probably have failed their training.
Yeah, I agree.
And then it goes to show that even if, he wasn't fit for battle, to be honest, he was nowhere near going to be off to fight the Separatists. But I think what he provided for the clones who were out there training, and obviously when the Separatists attack, I think the man goes down in honor as one of the greatest clones of all time.
He does. I didn't have him on my list, but I do. I've got a big load of respect for him. So I'm glad that you got him on there.
Nice. Next is, well, to be honest, this is a clone we don't see a lot of, but it's the implied backstory that I really find really interesting and really good. And his name's Wolf. He's got an E at the end.
Yeah,
so
Wolf.
I'm not going to pronounce it, but yeah, Wolf. And he's under Plo Koon. He's like Plo Koon's like Wolfpack. And one of the most interesting, things I like about that is on all of their ships, they have like a little, like graffiti mark of like, it's like a little animated picture of like Plo Koon, and then like the clones behind him, and that's on like all their ships, which I find really interesting and fascinating.
Yeah, the Wolfpack are the gang, to be fair, aren't they?
Yeah. It's just I think that implies that at one point there was a conversation between all the clones and that Wolfpack, and they were like, should we paint our ships with this? And they were like, oh yeah, go on. I think it's so brilliant. I think that, again, that shows relationship between the Jedi and the clones without actually having to say anything or show it. I think just having that bit of detail in there.
Yeah, and obviously when you see the other side of it as well with Plo Koon and his, you're not expendable to me sort of lines that he has for his clones. That relationship is very well established. Plus Wolf is obviously Wolf of Wolf and Gregor from the Rebels as well. So he is a clone that returns.
He is, a veteran. The man makes it all the way from the Clone Wars all the way through to Rebels.
I think he makes it all the way to the finale of Rebels, doesn't he?
Yeah, man, you can't put him down. And number 5, we have a true legend of the game, and that is Heavy.
On the Heavy.
I mean, the man went out in a blaze of glory for his brothers, and you can't take away from that sacrifice. So that's why he's made it into my top 5. Another key member of Domino Squad.
Heavy is. When I started watching this show, like the first 4 episodes, I liked the first time around. I thought I liked them a bit. On rewatch, I love them more now, like the Malevolence arc and that sort of thing. But on the first time, when I wasn't quite into the clones yet, I thought, these episodes are all right. And I got to the rookies, and I was like, Jesus. I was like, you're 5 episodes in, and you're already like killing off a clone in that sort of way. Brilliant episode. Right, so my top 5 is similar. I've got 3 the same and 2 different. Mm-hmm. So I've got Rex number 1, 5's number 2. For all the same reasons that you said. I mean, Rex is he's the GOAT at the end of the day. I mean, Rex made it into, I'm pretty sure Rex made it into one of my top 5 like characters from last week. Amongst the likes of like Han Solo and stuff. So, Rex is up there. He's the boy. 5's for all the reasons we've just said. Number 3, I went for Cody.
Nice.
I just think for the simple reason that he's Obi-Wan Kenobi's boy. Yeah. And Obi-Wan's the GOAT. And for that reason, Cody deserves the recognition. But also there's a lot of interesting episodes with Cody. His relationship with Rex is interesting. And obviously sort of seeing Cody then sort of take that shot on Obi-Wan in Revenge of the Sith makes his sort of whole character arc even more tragic, because you see that really close relationship that he builds and then eventually has to betray. Number 4 for me was Heavy, for all the reasons we were just talking about. Heavy's sacrifice is legendary. He's done dirty by the world, but to the audience, he lives on in our hearts. And then number 5 is a bit of a rogue one. I went for Hard Case.
Oh,
so Hard Case, he's a 501st member. His big moment was in the Darkness on Umbara arc, where he sacrifices himself for his brothers. It's a bit of a theme of clones that, are really popular among fans, but Hard Case is another one who does a great sacrifice. And I just quite liked Hard Case. He was a bit different, a little bit out there, but ultimately he was a good brother.
He was.
So yeah, that's my top 5. It was difficult because there's so many clones. There's Jesse, Echo. The ones that you said that I didn't have. I felt bad not getting Echo on there, but Echo's part of the Bad Batch now, so he's going to get plenty of attention.
Yeah, he will.
Yeah. Okay, so that's pretty much everything. We've talked about clones for a good length of time now.
A deep dive indeed.
A deep dive into clones. That's sort of the first of 2 parts of our journey to the Bad Batch sort of episodes. Next week we will be just talking for a good hour about the Bad Batch, what we already know about them from their sort of introduction in Clone Wars Season 7, to talking about, the trailers, what's getting us excited for Bad Batch the following week. So that should be a good fun episode. I'm looking forward to it. I haven't rewatched that Bad Batch arc since it first came out, so I'm going to be looking forward to a little rewatch there.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to going back and I might probably rewatch the whole of Season 7, to be honest, but I'm looking forward to going back and rewatching that arc and then having a look on the web and see what more information we can find out before next week. Obviously, I'll probably rewatch the trailer as well, see what I can delve from that.
But I definitely think Bad Batch is going to be talked about. I think this is one of these shows where the hype's really big within Star Wars and Clone Wars fans, but outside of that, it's not like Mandalorian, where sort of the more general fan base is hyped about it. It's a little bit more niche. But I have a feeling it's going to be one of these shows that will crack into the mainstream a little bit when a couple episodes drop. I've got high hopes for it.
Yeah, me too. It should be good.
Right. So that's episode 3. We do now have social media pages, so do follow us. We're on Twitter at Vaders Castle Pod, and we're on Instagram at Live from Vaders Castle. So do give us a follow. We've been sort of anything Star Wars related we'll be talking about. I've been doing little book reviews on the Instagram as well, because I've been reading a lot of Star Wars books at the moment. So yeah, give us a follow. Send us messages if you have anything you want to talk about. And we'll see you next week for episode 4.
Yeah. See you later. Have a nice week, guys. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, cheers for listening. Bye.